Welcome to another episode of Sound and Pal's Go to the Movies. This is a Throwback Thursday review, and I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hey, guys.
And today we're going to review Rosemary's Baby from 1968. And just heads up, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. Rosemary's Baby is about a young couple who moves into an apartment only to be surrounded by particular neighbors and occurrences when the wife becomes mysteriously pregnant. Paranoia over the safety of her unborn child begins to control her life. Okay, so Touly, I know you've never seen this movie before, so I'm just going to put it out there. There's actually a remake of this movie. I think it just happened a few years ago, but it was made into a TV series. I know you've never seen both of them, so I'm really curious about what you thought about this movie.
I'm going to try to evaluate this film on a couple of predecessors. One, the film came out in the 1960s, so I have to take that into account. Otherwise, certain standards won't hold up. For example, the visuals. We know that a lot of horror films made today, particularly in the Hollywood blockbuster genre, they tend to use a lot of CG or whatever to portray the evil monsters or beings that eventually come to fruition in these type of horror flicks. Because this was made in the 1960s, like I said, I have to take that into account and not judge it so much on the visuals and more so on, how they shot the scene through their camera placement, the lighting, other things versus those type of visual cues that you would expect from a horror flick in today's time. The only really thing though that I would say caught my attention in the early going of the film was how long the movie was. It was I forget exactly, but it was over 2 hours long. And normally, I guess when it comes to horror flicks or things that involves a horror element, I know this also involves some type of psychological aspect to it as well. Anything that's over 2 hours might seem a little too long if you can't get me on board within like an hour and a half, because that means that you have to dig around too much for maybe some details, or you have to go around the fence somehow to get to the main point. And I did feel that part of this movie did lag a bit, but for the most part, my attention was always there. I wanted to know what would happen to Rosemary. In my opinion, they did a pretty good job of making her feel that she was losing her mind. And at first, I was really suspicious of like the neighbors and stuff already, and the apartment they were moving in. All of that was already set up pretty well, and it got me to believe that there was something fishy going on. It was the husband that really made me realize that, she was the only victim out of all of this, because if he was like, I think, what was his name? His name was Guy, I believe. If he was actually, a really good husband, he would not have ignored all of these signs that Mia Farrow's character was indicating. So when I came to realize that Guy was also in on this, and that Rosemary was just being strung around, I felt really bad for her. And if I ended up feeling bad for a character like that, I think the movie did a great job. One thing that I really appreciated this film, and it might have been an aspect that wasn't too prevalent back then when they made movies revolving around like the horror theme, there weren't any like jump scares.
No.
And I appreciated that, because I'm not saying that I'm against jump scares, but when movies like, and I'm going to throw this under the bus unfortunately, when movies like The Nun, for instance, are using jump scares as one of the means of getting their audience to quote unquote get scared, I think you overuse that set of tools from your methodology of telling your story. I could accept, it from time to time, but if it's overused, then I feel like it takes away from the way you're trying to get people to feel a sense of fear. And normally I expect that from like, some music cues, the way the character's facial expression is being shown, camera perspective, all that jazz. Put it all together and let me be determined if I'm going to get scared out of this, not just because of jump scares. And this film, I really appreciated that it didn't rely on jump scares. I'm not sure if this, again, was prevalent back then when they were shooting films like this, if jump scares were an element in all of this. But if not, let's say if it was, I'm glad that they didn't go that route. So I appreciated that.
I really appreciated that aspect too. I'm on board with you. Everything you said about the jump scares not being there or being used properly, that's a really big thing with me. Especially, I'm a kind of guy who really wants to get scared, but not just because you're using the jump scares. And nowadays, the jump scare seems to be doing the diminishing returns in movies. Like you see them coming and you're prepared already. So I'm not scared anymore. I'm already like, I'm looking to see where the jump scare is going to fit. And I'll be like, oh, here it comes. There it is. And that's it. There's nothing scary about jump scares nowadays.
Yeah, the ending, I could have accepted like multiple ending to this. I guess it made more sense that she accepted the situation for what it was. I thought like she was gonna somehow kill the baby or something like that because of that relationship between mother and your infant. They decided to play that through and make her accept the role that she was gonna be in. In that sense, it made it more of a horror flick rather than there being some sense of closure for it being a happy ending. I mean, they did mention, or she kept on screaming the word God at the end, and of course, everybody who was in the covenant were like, well, there is no God or whatever. So it kind of brought back things into full circle where this is supposed to be a horror-like film where evil prevails in the end. I could accept that, but at the same time, I could have accepted had it gone a different route as well. Yeah, Mia Farrow's character actually really, I mean, she really did fall into the role that they meant for her to be played, despite them having to take advantage of who she was and made her feel very paranoid throughout the later half of the movie where after she got pregnant. Yeah, I felt really bad for her, particularly when they invited all those people over for the party, and those women were like keeping the husband away because, you know, they didn't want him to be involved in what she was trying to say, and so, you know, she was feeling pain and stuff, and these women were like telling her, well, if you have felt pain for this long, why didn't you do something about it sooner? And, you know, I was thinking the same thing too, and I felt really bad for her because she never had like the will or the courage to speak up because she was, I suppose, like this was her first carriage and she, you know, didn't know what to do. She was scared, and I truly sensed that from her. Like she was in this very dire situation where she just wanted the best outcome for her baby, and I guess in the end it sort of came to be like that despite the thing that she gave birth to was evil. So I think overall, again, being a film that I have never seen, being a film that came out in the 1960s, I could easily say that this was one of the better horror films that I have seen compared to like a lot of recent horror films from like the past 10 to 20 years even.
I'm glad you said that because I'm going to start my review by giving a few pros and cons. The only two cons that I had, which actually is technically one con, is the slow pace. Because now I'm used to the movies nowadays that they rush it. This movie took its time to develop the characters and everything, but I can see how people from nowadays watching it, though they're not comfortable. The attention span is, you know, we're lacking attention span nowadays. The other thing, which might be a con for most people, will be that Roman's name is attached to this film. But to that, I have to say, just judge Roman by the movies that he did versus what he did. They don't have nothing to do with each other. You know, his personal life and his movies are two separate things. And the guy did excellent movies. I mean, by my standards, he's a really good, you know, director. Another thing, like you said, Mia Farrow's character, amazing. Just letting you know, she did such an amazing job. But on set, Roman had a chart that he would actually grade her on every aspect of how she was acting, how she sounded, like surprised, happy, and stuff like that. I think there's a picture online of her in front of the poster that he would actually grade her like a little kindergarten kid. A lot of people think that it was him basically putting her down, but a lot of people see it as like, oh, this is how he actually broke down the role because he saw her as the main focus of this movie. If we see it, she is the person that we're seeing through her eyes and over her shoulder. And that's basically the next thing I'm going to talk about is the shots. Cinematography. The guy who did the cinematography was William Franker. Amazing. His way that he shot the film. I know, Touly, you're going to understand this. The long takes, and he made them fit into the movie properly. This is, back in the day, this was known as mise en screen, which is a French word for long takes. So it's the shot that basically makes the camera pan in a certain way, and it's a set stage. So it's basically like a fake stage, right? Let's say it's from only like 10 feet. So in the frame, you only have 3 feet, but you pan from the far right to the left and focusing on your actual or the people, you know, so you move towards where the people are, or have a character walk across stage, making the scenery feel like it's extending beyond what it actually is in the studio. Next thing, this set the standards for psychological thrillers, and my God, it did such an excellent job. Up to this day, a lot of movies reference this as inspiring. For example, the recent film that we saw with Jennifer Lawrence's mother. If you pay attention to the both posters, it's actually the director, Aaron, he's praising the old movie Rosemary's Baby by basically making the two posters similar and showing some aspects from this movie into his movie by some similar shots and some similar categories. Another thing that I really rave about this movie is how they use anxiety, paranoia, motherhood, the hormones that she was going through, and then at the end, bam, a twist. You actually feel that she, at the beginning, she must be under stress, and you agree with Guy. Like you said, you were saying like, oh, Guy's an asshole, but he's probably, just doing it for her best. And then the nosy neighbors, you just put them as nosy neighbors, but slowly you start changing your mind as she is suffering and you see her suffering in pain. Then you start becoming on her side. And they use that really well by alluding to her paranoia that people were telling her, even her doctors, that you shouldn't read books, but doctor, I read this in this book. No, you shouldn't read books. And basically, this is from the actual novel. I mean, this movie was adapted from a novel, and it was really back to back. It was so fast to turn around that, let's say, the book came out in 67. The movie was made in 68. The story of the book takes place in 66. So it's this whole thing that comes into like this really fine knit bubble that's really close to each other. So when you go to the movies and you see this, and nothing seems out of place, you're familiar with all the characters, all the words, everything, if you were back in the day. They use that to critique a lot of things back in the day. For example, they critiqued the way men take the role of superior over women by a guy telling her, you shouldn't listen to people, you shouldn't listen to your friends, you should only listen to me. And the doctor saying you shouldn't read books. Is basically like they're always putting her down because she's a woman. You don't know, we know because we're men. And that's one of the critiques in the movie. Another critique is society critiques on religion. That religion is basically just this thing that's out there that it's not real, or you can basically debate if it's real or not. But what we can actually accept is that there's always evil in the world and there's good. So that's what they do. They basically make Mia the good person, the innocent, who's being corrupted by the neighbors and everything around her society. Society corrupts people. And that was really subtle. But if you go see the movie over and over, you start looking at different layers. There's different things that you take away every time you see this movie. That's what I loved about this movie. It still holds up to this time. The only thing that doesn't is the pacing. That I'm going to stress a lot. The other thing is, since it was a horror movie, a lot of people will be like, well, I didn't see a monster. I didn't see anything. You never saw anything. But people will say, well, I saw the eyes of the baby. Not true. The eyes that she saw at the end were the eyes that she saw in her dream. You never see anything supernatural. Even Roman, he said, there is nothing supernatural in this film. It's all realistic. By what he means is, you never see a devil. You never see the baby deformed or anything like a demon baby that we would see in horror films nowadays. You never see anything out of the ordinary. These are all people. Maybe they're crazy. Maybe they're occult. But yet everything in the movie is still realistic. But at the same time, it makes you fear for Mia Farrow's well-being. Are they harming her? What are they going to do to her and everything? This movie, it's not what I would call a horror movie of nowadays. I just think it's a really deep psychological movie that makes you think beyond what other movies do.
Yeah, so what you said there about it not being your standard horror type film compared to today's time, I agree with that. But in the sense, in this film, I felt that the horror aspect of it came from, at least from my perspective, you being scared on behalf of Mia Farrow's character, yes. Rosemary. Not so much that what you're seeing in front of you is a horror flick. It's more like, man, this lady is losing her mind and she doesn't know what to do, and she's feeling all of these variety of feelings of, being fearful, trying to be a protective mother, trying to just escape her situation. And because of the believability that Mia Farrow was able to portray in her acting, it made me feel fear or scared for her, not so much of me just watching and I'm scared of what I'm watching. No, that's not it. It was through her character that I felt some sense of horror.
Yes.
If that makes any sense.
It does. I mean, that's what basically I said when the director said, Roman said, there's nothing supernatural in this movie, so don't expect a monster coming out. It's all realistic, which is you're really, authentically worried about her and her well-being, that she's going crazy, but nobody believes her. These people are out to get her, yes, but there's nothing supernatural about their activities. It's just they're crazy. They're in a cult, and you're like, whoa, these guys are extremists, you know? So you're worried about her, and you're saying, why aren't her friends believing her? Yes, we do see that her friend who comes to visit her, I believe, guy kills him, and then she finds the glove in his jacket and questions him about it. Well, okay, you can take that and be like, well, guy killed him. That's really scary. Yes, it's scary, but at the same time, there's no supernatural thing. There's not a monster who went out and killed him, or a witch who flew in the air. No, everything is realistic. All of these things could happen in real life. Your friends, your neighbors could be in a cult. They can basically try to overpower you. They can try to convince you. They can try to, give you herbs to drink. All of these things, especially if, and I did this to my sister when she was pregnant. I made her watch the movie. She legitimately got scared and started saying, why did you show me this? And I said, did you enjoy it? She's like, at that time, she did enjoy horror films. And she said, yes, but at the same time, I'm pregnant too. She's like, so now I'm concerned about everybody who's telling me advice. And I said, see, so the movie still did its job. It still got you paranoid to the point where you're believing that my sister believed that she was Mia Farrow. She's like, oh my God, what if that's happening to me, And to us, we're not pregnant, but we still see like, oh my God, she's in distress. Somebody help the poor girl, So it works in so many different levels,
Yeah, I think everything you said, I agree with, and including the pacing. I thought the movie was just a little too long. Maybe if it was boiled down to maybe an hour 45, I probably would have been more okay with that. But yeah, other than the pacing and some shots being overdone, because I already kind of like got the idea
yes
that they were trying to go for. I think that was probably my biggest complaint. But overall, I think it's a very good film, particularly one that came out in the 1960s, and I think it still holds pretty good in today's time.
Yeah, I agree with you. Another thing I might just suggest, if you enjoyed this movie and you want it to be a little shorter, maybe, I haven't seen it, but you want to see the mini TV series that was adapted in 2014 for Rosemary's Baby. The role of Mia actually is taken over by Zoe Saldana. So if you want to see it and see if that changes its pace, feel free to do that. I think I might check it out depending, on my time schedule, but I'm not going to do a review for it. So with that, let's wrap this up. Touly, let's give it our final grade.
I would give it a score between like a 7.5 to an 8. Probably more so on like the 8.0 side. Again, if I were to jumble this into like the horror genre, giving it a score an 8 is really, really high. Normally a decent horror film for me, I would give it like around a 6. But this one, it's easily 7.5 to an 8.
Okay, well, that's good because I'm also leaning to your grade, but I'm going to combine my love for horror movies and seeing that this set the standard for psychological thrillers. And also, I'm interested in the cinematography of this film. I'm going to give it a little higher grade. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 because this movie still holds to present day. This is a good example of good filmmaking. You can show it in a class. Also show it in a horror classical sense that you can basically say this is how horror should be done without all those jump scares. And I really want somebody to drive that through. No more jump scares. So that does it for the Rosemary's Baby review. Join us next time when we go old school and we review Dracula, the Bela Lugosi version from 1931. And social media is down in the description. And hit us up if you have any questions. And remember, keep watching movies.